Welcome back to The Explainer. So, if you've tried upgrading your PC, buying a new laptop, or even grabbing a console lately, well, I probably don't need to tell you that your wallet is taking an absolute beating right now. You've likely felt the sting firsthand. We're seeing prices for basic memory just skyrocketing, with analysts reporting jumps of another 40 to 50% just in this current quarter. Apple has hiked their MacBook prices, Microsoft added up to $150 to the Xbox, and building a mid-range gaming rig today? Yeah, that basically costs what a luxury, top-of-the-line PC used to cost just a few years ago. It's incredibly frustrating, right? Well, the internet has actually dubbed this the Ramageddon, or the Ram Apocalypse. Okay, let's dive into this and unmask what's really going on behind the scenes of this massive price surge. And that brings us to the central mystery we're looking at today. The overarching narrative we constantly hear from tech companies is that this is simply the cost of progress. They claim that the massive, sudden boom in AI is requiring data centers to just vacuum up every available piece of silicon, which is completely starving the everyday consumer market. But there's a massive twist to this story. A newly filed class action antitrust lawsuit suggests this shortage isn't a natural consequence of AI at all. It actually alleges that this crisis is entirely manufactured by the very people making the hardware. So we really have to ask the big question here. Are we genuinely running out of memory on a global scale, or are everyday consumers being completely played? Section 1. The official defense and the AI scapegoat. The mainstream corporate narrative centers around one very specific technology. And to be perfectly fair to the manufacturers, there is absolutely some real technical truth to their defense. We're talking about HBM, or high bandwidth memory. When you hear about those massive AI chips like NVIDIA's Blackwell, they aren't using standard desktop memory. They use HBM, which is essentially high-speed DRAM that's physically stacked in 3D layers. It's a total marvel of engineering. Now, what's really interesting about this whole concept is that manufacturing HBM physically takes away capacity from standard memory. It requires significantly more factory wafer space per bit than the standard DDR4 and DDR5 RAM you and I put in our own computers. And because these AI data centers have practically bottomless pockets and will happily pay massive premiums, memory manufacturers have rapidly shifted their factory floors to chase that AI money. Theoretically, that leaves consumer tech out in the cold. But to really understand how a shift like that can instantly derail the entire global market, you have to look at the market share breakdown. The global DRAM market is completely dominated by what we call the Big Three. That's Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. Together, they control over 90% of the entire market. I mean, that is staggering monopoly power. When you've got 90% market share, you literally don't have to worry about a dozen smaller competitors jumping in to fill the void. When these three giants decide to pivot their factories away from consumer RAM and point absolutely everything toward highly profitable AI memory, the entire global supply of standard tech components just dries up overnight. And if you were to ask these megacorporations why they don't simply expand and build more factories to cover both AI and consumer needs, well, their answer is actually quite bold. The CEO of Micron recently went on record with a fascinating defense. He essentially blamed consumers, claiming that customers drove prices too low in previous years, leaving the company with no cash to build new factories. So their defense is basically, hey, you enjoyed cheap RAM way too much, so now we're too poor to build more plants? As you might imagine, tech enthusiasts and legal experts are absolutely not buying this whole poor, starving megacorporation act. And as we're about to see, neither are the courts. Section 2. The smoking gun. A manufactured crisis? Enter the bombshell twist of our explainer. A massive class action antitrust lawsuit, specifically case 326-CV06345, has officially been filed in the Northern District of California against Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. The plaintiffs in this case are basically throwing the whole AI defense right out the window. They are formally alleging that the big three memory giants use the AI boom as a highly convenient pretext to secretly coordinate their actions, price gouge everyday buyers, and artificially cripple the consumer memory market. So the crucial point is understanding how this alleged collusion completely defies basic economic principles. Normally, in a healthy free market, if two companies shift all their focus to AI memory and the price of standard consumer RAM suddenly spikes through the roof, a third competitor should logically look at that and say, hey, let's ramp up our old DDR4 and DDR5 lines, completely undercut our rivals, and capture millions of desperate paying consumers, right? That's capitalism 101. But that didn't happen. Instead, all three giants suspiciously pulled back on conventional RAMs simultaneously. They choked off the supply at the exact same time, basically ensuring that consumer prices stayed insanely high across the entire board. Section 3. A history of collusion. The third time around. Now, you might be thinking, come on, these massive tech companies would never risk coordinating a global shortage. But history actually has some very bad news for anyone giving them the benefit of the doubt. This specific group of companies has a proven, documented history of doing exactly this. Let's move forward and see how this builds. If you track the timeline, you actually see a cyclical pattern of price manipulation stretching across 2 decades. In 2005, they were caught red-handed. Between 2016 and 2018, they were investigated again for mysterious, synchronized price spikes. And here we are today, looking at a brand new antitrust lawsuit alleging the exact same behavior. Let me anchor that history lesson with a very real, very big number: $300 million. Back in 2005, the United States Department of Justice literally caught Samsung and Hynix in a massive international DRM price-fixing conspiracy. Samsung was forced to pay a $300 million criminal fine, and Hynix paid $185 million. So yeah, this is definitely not their first rodeo. The plaintiffs in the current lawsuit argued that this is literally the third time we are seeing this exact same cycle orchestrated by the exact same characters. Section 4. The absurd reality. What consumers face today. Whether this current crisis gets proven in court or is legally dismissed as just parallel market behavior, the real-world fallout is undeniable. And this brilliantly illustrates just how artificially starved the market has become. Look at the ridiculous lengths retailers and consumers are being forced into because of this Ramageddon. Motherboard and memory brands are getting so desperate to keep their retail price points looking somewhat normal that they're selling dummy kits. You literally buy a box of RAM and you get one actual functioning stick of memory, and the second stick is just a hollow plastic shell with glowing RGB lights so your PC doesn't look empty. No way, right? Then you have what people are calling the Costco tax. Over in the US, Costco reportedly started physically ripping GPUs and RAM out of pre-built display PCs right on their store shelves. They'll only install the memory after you prove you bought the machine, purely to prevent thieves from treating these display computers like a silicon gold mine. And it's not even just PCs. Basic consumer tech, like home Wi-Fi routers and smart home devices, are drastically dropping their internal specs, making them literally worse than last year's models, just because basic DRAM components are running totally dry. So, what does this all mean for you trying to navigate this crazy market? Well, the really frustrating truth is that industry analysts do not expect any significant relief for consumer memory prices until 2028 at the earliest. This highly profitable scarcity, whether it's naturally driven by AI demand or artificially manufactured through collusion, is entirely working in the memory giant's favor. So, practically speaking, your absolute best bet right now is to just hold on to your current hardware for as long as possible. If you absolutely must upgrade, don't go hunting for the newest releases, try to find sales in older stock, and definitely keep a very close eye on how this California lawsuit develops. Look, the demand from AI data centers is absolutely real. There's no denying that. But the complete, synchronized collapse of the consumer market, the aggressive scaling back of everyday components to seemingly force a massive pricing surge, certainly raises some major red flags. We've laid out the technical reality of HBM production, right alongside the undeniable, documented history of international price fixing by the exact same companies that control 90% of the market today. So I'll leave you with this final thought to consider. What do you think? Are the big three memory giants colluding yet again to maximize their profits? Or is this simply the brutal, unavoidable reality of transitioning into the AI era? It is a fascinating mystery with literally billions of dollars on the line. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this gives you a much clearer picture of exactly why your next PC